Coverkillernation proudly presents the Dream Theater Discography Series, an introduction.
This video is really just one that has a monumental task at hand, and one that really is going to require almost pulling off the impossible. How do you introduce a band that really needs no introduction? How do you bring the scope of what they have done throughout over 2 decades of existence, in fact, closer to 25 years, in fact, bordering on 30 years of existence? How do you really bring that down and narrow that scope to just about 10 minutes or so? And that's the task that is really placed in front of this video as we are introducing the band Dream Theater. Of course, Dream Theater won the Music Madness 2013 discography contest, a fact that was on Wikipedia for about 3 days and then was removed. But you guys in the Coverkillernation, you guys know at heart that that's what happened because you guys voted for it. And for those of you who have just come in, well, it happened. Believe me. I counted the votes. Dream Theater is a band that has been with us for quite some time. However, their majesty, their power, their real popularity has really begun to surge over the course of the past decade and a half. And it's weird because their most classic album, the album that has sold the most copies, it actually was one that occurred in the 1990s, before we even hit the middle part of the 1990s. And you would think that perhaps the surge, the acclaim, and everything would have come then. But no, instead it's actually been within the past 10 to 15 years that the popularity of the band has steadily moved upward, skyrocketed, and they are now one of, if not the biggest progressive metal band on earth at the moment. It wasn't always that way. It wasn't that way whenever they were Majesty, whenever they were first forming, where this was just a dream of a couple of guys that were attending the same school who ended up dropping out in order to pursue the band. Now, this was not exactly what was really, I guess, in the cards, or what the thought process even was, for names such as John Young or John Petrucci or Mike Portnoy. No, it definitely was not what they thought was going to happen. Throughout this band's history, they have gone through, by comparison of other bands, not a lot in the way of personnel changes. A lot of the personnel changes that occurred were really at one position for a very, very long time, and a lot of the personnel changes prior to that was at one position, but that was before the band even had a record in the can. They originally started with vocalist Chris Collins, who didn't even make it to the recording of the debut of When Day and Dream Unite, and that was actually handled by Charlie Dominici. And whenever that occurred, this was something where there was a lot of fanfare that was kind of promised to this band. Whenever they first started recording and the talent level was kind of understood by their first label, there was a lot of fanfare that was expected. However, that wasn't really what happened. Instead, a lot of the promises that they had received from their initial label really didn't come to fruition, and they were also left without a vocalist, which eventually those shoes were basically filled by James LaBrie. After this happened, this is whenever the story of the band Dream Theater really becomes that which everybody knows. A lot of people will probably say that they knew that the band was originally called Majesty. A lot of them will obviously probably know about Charlie Dominici. It's something that has been talked about in Dream Theater DVDs and everything. Not many people may know about Chris Collins. Not a lot of people may have listened to When Day and Dream Unite, though they should because of the Itzy Jam. It's one of the premier songs of their discography, one that they still opt to play live every so often, and it's definitely a real awesome song. And whenever I was in a band, one of my guitar players was absolutely obsessed with it. He loved to play it. He loved to, learn the intricacies of it. And this is just in the beginning. This is on an album that is extremely difficult to find. This is one that you really have to search in order to locate it. It's one that you probably have a better chance of finding used in a music store than new. But whenever you get into the 1990s, whenever you get into the James LaBrie years, whenever you get into the years where Kevin Moore was their keyboard player, the solid lineup that we knew for a couple of albums, that is something that really changes a lot. Images and Words, Awake, these are albums that are usually very readily available. A harder one to find actually is A Change of Seasons, and whenever that happens, whenever that occurs, we see a switch over to Derek Sherinian at the keyboard helm. And that is a helm that he held for a couple of albums until eventually giving way to Jordan Rudess, who is the keyboardist to this day. And after that, we didn't have a personnel change. We didn't have anybody who really exited this band or entered the band until Mike Mangini came in after Mike Portnoy left. Mike for Mike is how they switched out. And of course, where Mike Portnoy has kind of landed ever since his departure has perplexed some metal fans, but at the same time, it has also led to the Flying Colors album and the Flying Colors project, which is definitely very, very good. And the Adrenaline Mob project, which has a lot of promise, but for whose first album ended up being really, really bad. But we're not here to talk about Adrenaline Mob nor Flying Colors. We're here to talk about Dream Theater. Dream Theater's music could be described as the wet dream of any person who, instead of whacking off to a picture of Pamela Anderson in the 1990s, would whack off to a photo of a Fender Stratocaster or any other world-famous guitar of your choice. This is the story of a band that basically, you saw the drum kit that Mike Portnoy was sporting, and as a drummer, you immediately started to salivate to the point in which waterfalls were starting to form. If you were a keyboard player, you would hear Kevin Moore's parts or Jordan Rudess's parts these days, either that or Derek Sherinian's on the albums that he was a part of, and just immediately wonder how in the hell he is playing circles around anything that you ever dreamed. These guys are a progressive metal band that are an instrumentalist's paradise. Somebody who is in love with that which they play. This is the band that they would definitely use in order to help enhance that love. Either that, or make them just want to quit. That's the effect that Dream Theater can have because of their technical proficiency on the instruments in which they play. Definitely an elite squad. Definitely one of the most elite squads that you're going to find. Technical death metal and things like that, come on. Yeah, they're playing fast, they're playing technical, they are precise. But these guys are also playing with a lot of heart. These guys are developing and projecting mood with each and every note that they play. It isn't all just about spacking off on an instrument. It's about projecting a mood while you spack off on an instrument. And plus they're doing it in progressive metal, where you really have to project emotion in order to really be taken seriously. Progressive music is not one where you can just kind of lollygag around and show off how great you are. Because if you're emotionless, well then, that music is emotionless. And these guys bleed their emotions all over the place. For crying out loud, there's a 12-step suite over a couple of albums that is based around the alcoholism of one member and various elements that were dealt with regarding that. Now, these are musicians. This is a band that their albums are not necessarily going to go gold and platinum. Only one of them has gone gold. These are musicians that are not necessarily going to be rich beyond your wildest dreams, although they probably are doing pretty well, considering their concert tickets are very expensive, and their endorsements, the endorsement deal list would probably stretch from the top of the blinds here all the way to, probably Pittsburgh, which is about 60 miles from me. Yeah, these guys definitely aren't necessarily hurting for money, but it's not like we're talking about somebody who's selling 10 million records per pop. But their fan base is rabid. Everything about them and about their fans is die hard, and they push forward every step of the way and try to make an album that is almost impossible to forget. Most of their studio albums are linear, so to speak. However, there are some exceptions that need to be mentioned. Of course, the one that comes to mind is Change of Seasons, which Change of Seasons is a very, very long, over 20-minute long song, which is just phenomenal. It's terrific. I may make a top 10 list. Don't be surprised if that ends up being on it. 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence is another such album where the first disc on this 2-disc affair were just individual tracks, and then the second part was the suite of 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence, which takes up the entire second disc. The entire second disc, one song, broken up into 2 parts. Not into 2 parts, into multiple parts, broken up into parts. And, wow, just absolutely spellbinding. Not quite as good as A Change of Seasons in my opinion, but my opinions will come later whenever I review each album individually. And then, of course, the Mammoth Beast, the one that I would love to talk about, and we'll talk about at length whenever this happens, of course, Metropolis 2 Scenes of a Memory, the epic concept album. One of the top 25 Coverkillernation albums of all time. This is probably one of the best concept albums you're ever going to find. Not to mention, this contains some of their best music. This was a late 90s gem that really just wowed audiences and actually introduced me to the band. And I've been a fan ever since. The work has just been that mind-blowingly impressive to me. Now, right now, they are working on the follow-up to their last album, A Dramatic Turn of Events, and we are eagerly anticipating its arrival, probably sometime this year, if not early 2014. I would love to have this discography review done before that album comes out, but we're also going to talk about some other things that they do. We're also going to be talking about their covers album series. That's right. Some people just cover songs. Dream Theater does that. But Dream Theater also covers whole entire albums. Master of Puppets, Big in Japan, Number of the Beast. Yeah, there's a couple of them. There's about 5 of them, actually. And we're going to include that in this discography as well. There's also a myriad of personal side projects, or side projects that include multiple members of the band. And we might dive into some of those as well. We're going to see. There's a lot to talk about with this band. Dream Theater is definitely one that has an extensive lore. And definitely a band that really, really are so passionate about the music that they literally seem to be making it constantly. I mean, just imagine, just think of all the band names that include at least one member. Liquid Tension Experiment, The Jelly Jam, Platypus, Transatlantic. It goes on and on and on. And these are just ones that I'm thinking of off the top of my head. Performing music is one thing, but living it is another. And Dream Theater lives music. So prepare yourselves, Coverkiller Nation. Prepare yourselves to go on a journey. To go on the band Dream Theater's journey. One that's going to take you soaring to new heights, perhaps. One that may take you on a very emotional ride that includes some lows. And some of the most dazzling, mind-bending music of the progressive metal nature that has probably ever been made. So sit back, relax, and have fun.